Good evening, and you're very welcome to the webinar. Thanks for joining us this evening. My name is Roisin White. I'm a Communications Executive here at Fingal County Council, and I'll be your host for tonight's webinar, which is on the topic of the public consultation on the draft active travel strategy for Fingal. Tonight we'll present that draft document to you and speak with you about what the next steps will be in bringing it to the public, and we'll also look forward to taking your questions. This webinar will be recorded, and that recording will be made available on our website in the coming days. This is the second of two webinars on the topic, and the first happened on the 28th of April. A recording of that session is already available on our website, and if you'd like to watch it or watch back the questions that were asked in that session, you can see it at fingal.ie/active travel/strategy, or you can find it on our YouTube channel, which is under the name Fingal County Council. This consultation began on April 4th and will end on May 23rd. This is to allow enough time for every person who's interested in the topic of active travel in Fingal to review the document and tell us what they think of it. You can share your thoughts by making a submission with us. And submissions can be made through our online portal, consult.fingal.ie. Submissions can be made by individuals or by organisations such as residents associations or commercial groups who might like to bring their comments together as one. And you're very welcome to make a submission. If you prefer to make a submission by post, you can do so, and the details on how to send one in can also be found on consult.fingal.ie. Shortly, we'll begin with a presentation from Sinead Murphy, who's a Senior Engineer here at Fingal County Council in the Department of the Environment, Climate Action and Active Travel. And then we'll move on to a question and answer session where Sinead will be joined by her colleagues Kieran Marr, also from the Active Travel team, and Alison Pickett, from our consultant sister. This online event is your opportunity to ask questions of the team, and we really look forward to hearing your queries this evening. As I said, this is the second of two webinars, and the other can be reviewed along with the question and answer session that took place on that evening. If you do have a question, please pop it into the Q&A box. You should find a box for Q&A in the top right-hand corner of your screen. Your questions can be placed in there, and you please note you will only see your own questions as they come in. All of your questions will be read in full by the team, and we'll do our best to get to as many of them as possible this evening. As with any of these webinars, we normally expect a fairly high volume of questions, so just please be aware that if we get the same question in slightly different phrasing from many people, we might just slightly paraphrase it or merge questions together to get through as many of them as we can. So please don't be alarmed if you don't hear your question read out exactly as you wrote it. Exactly as it was written, it will be sent to the team for review. Pardon me. If we do, in the unlikely event that we have any technical issues, bear with us as we try to resolve them. And in the highly unlikely event that the webinar needs to be restarted for some reason, please check the email you used to register for the session, as that's where we'll contact you with a new link. Thanks again for joining us this evening. I'm going to hand over now to Sinead Murphy, who is going to start our presentation.
Good evening, everybody, and hope you can hear me. I'm just going to share my screen here and start my presentation. Apologies, I'm having some problems here. Ocean, can you see that?
Yes, Sinead, we can just see your desktop there. Would you like us to get
sharing
your slides instead?
Yeah, please, if you could.
Yeah, no problem. If you want to
unshare it's not sharing.
No problem. Bear with us, folks, and we'll just get this sorted. We just seem to be having some connectivity issues. The perils of hybrid working and managing these kinds of meetings. Apologies for the delay. It's a good opportunity for me to remind those of you who are on the call that you can just pop questions into the Q&A. As I said, you can put them in at any time throughout the session, and we'll get to them when we're finished the presentation phase. And you'll only see your own questions in that space, so don't be alarmed if you don't see any coming in. There are questions coming from others most likely, and we look forward to getting to them. Just bear with us for one moment while we get those slides shared up. Apologies for this. Okay, Sinead, we have slides there if you want to try and unmute yourself there and pop on.
Okay. There I have the slides there. Okay, so thanks very much, everybody. And I'm just going to go through today the draft active travel strategy, which we have subject to public consultation at the moment. And I'll go through the background, Yeah, I'm unmuted. Roisin, can you hear me?
Sorry, folks, there just seems to be a slight audio delay. Sinead, if you want to just carry on there, everything's fine.
Okay, I have the active travel strategy here and the presentation overview. I'll go through the background to the Fingal active travel strategy, the policy context, the methodology, and the contents of the strategy itself, and then an overview of the strategy and where we are with it and the next steps. The Fingal development plan is being prepared at the moment. That's the plan from 23 to 29. And the objective has been put in that strategy, prepare an active travel strategy to encourage active travel and modal shift to sustainable transport modes. Then we have the policy and the strategy context. At the national level, we have the national planning framework, the national national development plan, the planning, land use and transport, and also the regional spatial economic strategies, the Greater Dublin Area Transport Strategy 22 to 42. And of course, we have the more local stuff that's from the county level, and that's Fingal Development Plan, which, as I've mentioned, is currently under review, and the local transport implementation plans and the local economic and community plans. And all of them will feed in to the actual active travel strategy itself. The policy context, we've got the National Planning Framework and also the Project Ireland 2040 National Development Plan, which is a step change in the approach towards funding active travel. We've Climate Action Plan 21. We've also got the National Sustainable Mobility Policy, which sets out the strategic framework and the action plan to meet the climate plan of. And we have the road safety strategy that is the end of 21, which is Vision Zero. It's quite aspirational, aimed at eradicating road deaths, road traffic and serious injuries by 2050. And of course, our travel strategy feeds quite well. And as I mentioned earlier, the draft Greater Dublin Area Transport Strategy 22 to 42. That's aimed at travelling. And on the next, we have our consultants here tonight, Sister, who have done some work for us in this regard in strategy. Evidence review was taken, a strategy document was in format, an internal consultation was done across the various different departments of Fingal County Council. We presented it to the policy committee, the transport infrastructure, and brief councillors and stakeholder engagement through March 22 and online consultation. And we had one of these one of the webinars last week, and obviously tonight preparing a public consultation report and finalising the strategy June, July, and then presenting the final strategy back to SPs.
Apologies, folks. We just seem to be having some ongoing issues with audio. Sinead, if I could just ask you to stop for a moment.
I just want to go through the contents, the vision, the benefits of the active travel strategy itself, the policy context, strategy and pillars, Fingal case study, some on changing behaviour and leadership, governance and partnership, funding and value for money, and finally the strategy out. The draft vision that we have outlined in our active travel strategy is for Fingal to ensure that walking, cycling and the natural choice for everyday journeys of all ages and ability to travel to shop or socially to work or to achieve this vision by putting active travel first in our planning, design and delivery of infrastructure and initiatives. So this is the overview chapter of the active travel strategy, and I suppose the most important thing I'd like to bring to your attention here is the schematic there in green in at the bottom of the page. It is called the transport users hierarchy, and in effect, this is book one, and in pretty much every document I've referred to there earlier, you might see this, which essentially puts pedestrians at like next, public transport next, and are at the bottom. And in essence, it mirrors the amount of carbon emissions by those various transport users, with pedestrians basically have no carbon emissions, and slightly more as you progress down that users hierarchy. That's in essence the basis of the whole active travel strategy, and then what we're trying to do is to try and ensure that this hierarchy is implemented on the ground. Next slide, please. Thanks. These are various benefits of active travel, and you can see that many of them for car journeys: improved air quality, increasing climate emergency, improved health, increased access to employment, access to leisure and sporting facilities, sustainable economic growth, social inclusion, food safety, and reduced noise level. And in essence, I know climate action is there as bubbles. The climate action piece as encapsulating all of them, a huge step in our climate action objectives in local and nationally. The next slide there. In our active travel unit, which has been set up over the last year, we have got a number of pillars, I suppose, we're working on, and they're highlighted here. And probably the first one I'd like to mention is strategic planning, which is in effect what we're doing tonight by preparing and hopefully launching the active travel strategy and engaging in county development plan and all of the plans at national and regional level. Next, what we're doing is implementation or delivery of protected cycle lanes. That is in essence ensuring that cycle lanes are segregated from motor traffic, and are trying to do that insofar as possible by the reallocation of existing road space, which means it's no impact, it's quicker, it's faster, and also less carbon emissions because you're producing less construction materials. And in essence, that's what we're doing. Obviously some of the greenways are strategic, where and would be breaking soil. There'll be those sort of greenways produced, so maybe strategic infrastructure. We have towns and villages, which is the next one. So we're trying to free up some space back to pedestrians and in terms of activity and town squares and so on, to boost sort of community feel and activities in the centre of town. The next one is connectivity, and that's looking at very small wins, sometimes can give very big gains, in terms of maybe breaking down to travel, such as missing gates, maybe going into a park and through a park where it may be much quicker to cycle through that park, but it's just quite difficult missing gates, and these are on the side of the park, or indeed housing estates or developments where there may be accessing out to transport, school, for example, the shops. So we're collating all those requests with regard to connectivity, analysis, and the next one is road safety, and under the Safer Routes to School program, currently being run by on behalf of the NTA, and they did a national call out for schools to express an interest in this program. We have 11 shortlisted for the Fingal county, and we are preparing designs at the moment with assistance from our consultants, and we'll be implementing this. In effect, is making the front of school safer for children, more welcoming for children who are coming by foot or on their bikes, and also looking at broader connectivity issues with regard to maybe accessing residential areas with the schools and so on. And then the final piece there we have is mobility. We're looking at a lot of cutting edge things there, like e-bike share, cycling without age, on scooters, station in the future. Also looking at a lot of events there to help and encourage people to take active travel or to increase the amount of active travel they're currently taking. Okay, the next slide there, please. Active travel strategy. Well, we have an overview here, and this is sort of looking at the building on success themes. And while the active travel has been set for the last year, it is really important to note that we've had some very significant projects in place over the last number of years. U Street, shown in map 5, taken in 2021, that's currently pedestrianised and subject to public consultation on the public realm scheme in the next 6 months or so. And Baldoyle to Marnock Greenway is another one, and that has been a great success, and we're looking at connecting to it in various different ways. And another one there that has been a very significant success over the last number of years, our sharing scheme, and that was particularly successful around the time of COVID, and data showed quite a significant spike, particularly in first and second lockdowns. Okay, the next slide, please. The active travel strategy overview. Well, we have a number of different pieces here. In terms of engagement, we have engaged very significantly across our own departments and big this has been effects across the council. For example, I mentioned towns and villages and the effect of economic development. So we've been dealing with that team, and also things such as operation and maintenance of these during future. Simple to note that our team that we're aiming to deliver on the ground, deliver the infrastructure on the ground, will be disciplinary, and we're ensuring we get that cross disciplinary oversight of some also. We've also been engaged with elected representatives, and we have great support in the council chamber, which is wonderful, and stakeholder groups such as community groups, like for example, Town, sporting groups, business groups such as chambers of commerce, educational groups, and schools, and third level campuses, and so on, and just more broadly with citizens in general. In terms of the enablement, I think one of the most important to do is to make it convenient to put the infrastructure there, to make it easy, make it fairly obvious, and make it fun, and make it the first choice for living. And we do that infrastructure, to the safe infrastructure, and also initiatives made structure and to encourage them. In terms of communications, we have a communication plan for our active travel unit, and indeed for each in the active travel unit to decide, how it's best to communicate on each of the projects that are coming down the tracks. But it's also important that we're doing projects generally on what active travel is, what it's about. We also want to have social signalling, so that in effect, active travel, there's many signals in that direction. And as I said earlier on, so convenience, there's fun, and we want what we're doing, how we're and we'll do that by way of in places where it's very so technology pieces such as for example cycle counters, that's really good to see people pass or on a particular day, that can be very effective too. In terms of training advice, we're providing assistance to use use the new assets after they have been built. Also assisting people maybe that have been on bikes for a while and walked with groups or whatever to set up initiatives and so on, so that we can actually assist, encourage. That will also go out to groups I mentioned earlier on, such as like sports organizations, education institutions also. And in terms of inspiration, we've got a whole array of events going on in Fingal, not least week, which is coming up very soon. And there's an array of events going on, everything from servicing your bike to training your bike and so on. We've also got a piece of this going on, normal Fingal events that have gone on through the year. For example, flavors involved, we have a travel section there as well. A great site through the Enchanted Forest in Millennium, on their well lit up bikes, all dressed up as Santa Claus or whatever, down through the new bike lanes in Hartstown, which was great. So that's just a bit of a flavour of sort of how we're going to go. Okay, the overview then. Have a number of different strategy outcomes here in terms of what we want to do. Increasing the companies to work knowledge by bike, delivering additional technical cycles, provide more secure cycle spaces. And I mentioned it earlier on, but that's a key piece of infrastructure that we're currently rolling out, and we have more to do. Expanding and electrifying the local bike share scheme, and currently preparing potential documents in that regard, and initiating safety schemes in schools and towns and villages, and ensuring that all new developments include measures to switch access traffic. And there's very significant ongoing engagement between ourselves and our planning and strategic infrastructure team, strategic planning unit, and also folks that are dealing with management missions by big basis. Next slide. In terms of next steps, I'll just hand over to Kieran. Next steps.
Thanks, Sinead. Well, as part of the next steps, that's one of the reasons why we're here tonight. This is the second of our two public webinars. We also have the 7-week online survey, which is going on the moment till the 23rd of May to tie in with the end of Bike Week. So we'd ask for all your submissions to come in, as many as possible, and let everyone know that we are looking for submissions to see where we can improve on it. Where have we missed key messages, and we also have internally where our communications department are putting it out there through social media. We'll also be doing roadshows. It's just to promote the strategy that there is a consultation online, and we'd love to get as much feedback as possible. We also, as part of this next steps, we're having stakeholder engagement with some of the statutory bodies, the National Transport Authority, Transport Infrastructure Ireland, the Guards, the National Ambulance Centre, Fire Brigade, and so on, and Chamber of Commerce we've already met. So it's just trying to get out there as wide as possible to seek public's submissions on the strategy. And as I said again, where we feel that it can be strengthened, it's not a delivery plan as regards site-specific projects. That's done through a different format, but we're just here tonight to hope that you can make a submission on the strategy before the 23rd of May. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Kieran, and thanks, Sinead, for your input there. My apologies to anyone who's experiencing further audio difficulties there. We know we got a couple of reports of it in the chat. So what we'll do is, as I said, the recording will be issued later, but as we go through the questions, we'll try and readdress some of the items that Sinead mightn't have been as easily heard speaking about there, with apologies for that. As I said, just the perils of hybrid working and everybody trying to manage joining information sessions from different locations. So thank you very much for your patience and for sticking with us through those audio issues. So we'll go now to the first of the questions, and before we do, I just want to remind you that the Q&A box is there in the top right of your screen, and you're very welcome to start inputting your questions. I suppose some of the things we'd really like to hear from people on the call about tonight are, what do you think the priorities for the strategy should be? What do you think may be missing from the strategy, or what would you like to see included in it? Do you have any feedback on the look and feel of the document if you've had a chance to review it as of yet? And if you haven't had a chance to review it, I'd encourage you after this session to go directly to consult.fingal.ie, where you can look at the document in full and have a chance to absorb the contents. So as I said, with that, we go to questions. So first question that we have in here is, are there any plans to improve footpaths or road crossing facilities on the R124 in Old Portmarnock? Sinead, I'll come to you first on that. And if you're having audio difficulty, please feel free to hand over to someone else on the team.
Roisin, I'm having a bit of problem with that one, and I can't hear you very well.
Okay, no problem. I've just popped it into the chat there as well, Sinead, that you should be able to see as a presenter. So just to repeat the question, are there any plans to improve the footpaths or road crossing facilities on the R124 in Old Portmarnock Village?
Sorry, Roisin, I couldn't hear that at all.
Okay, Kieran, would you like to come in on this?
Yeah, I'll come in on that. I suppose I know the Fingal area quite well. Just for information, the strategy does it's not. We don't have particular locations of where we're looking to do improvements and bringing out projects like that. We will have delivery plans every year that will have these type of projects that you're requesting. So as regards Portmarnock itself, we do link in. We have another department within Fingal County Council. It's the Planning and Strategic Infrastructure Unit, and they're aiming to deliver the coastal route there from Sutton to Malahide, which links into the Baldoyle to Portmarnock. And then where Active Travel is hoping to come in is what we then provide the linkage to that cycle network, and that's where we want you to come in with requests to our Active Travel email address, active.travel@fingal.ie. So it's not really done through this forum, but all suggestions for improvements, the R124 Portmarnock or wherever else in the county of Fingal, that's where we would take those submissions, and they'd be added onto our connectivity tracker, a tracker that Sinead mentioned before, and then there would be a multi-criteria analysis done on that, and then the projects come out of that tracker. Thanks, Roisin.
Thanks, Karen, for that. Sinead is rejoining us in just a moment. So while she's doing so, I just wanted to have an opportunity to remind everybody on the call that the Fingal Development Plan is actually currently still out for consultation also. And we find on a lot of these calls where people are asking about specific areas of development of different facilities, that the development plan is something that might be interesting to them, as it's where topics like zoning and future plans for various sections of the County Council and how big projects get undertaken are defined. So I'd encourage you to go again to consult.fingal.ie, where you'll also find the development plan and have a look at that if it's something that you think might be of interest to you. And we'll move on to the second question now, which is that there are lots of greenways and they're lovely, but what about linking them up? So connectivity doesn't exist currently, for example, in Portmarnock between the lovely greenway and the walkway into the village and other places. Sinead, welcome back. Hopefully we might have resolved our audio issues. I might put that one to you if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think I have. I think that sounds a lot better. I don't hear my voice echoing back at me, so that's good. Yeah, with regards to connectivity, we're very much aware of the need to join up all the bits and pieces that we're putting on the ground. And as I mentioned previously, some of the very large greenways, the strategic projects, are being delivered on the ground by our colleagues in the Planning and Strategic Infrastructure Department. And I suppose I could think of three very big ones that are coming down the tracks: Broadmeadow Way, Fingal Coastal Way, and the Royal Canal Greenway. And we have very significant ongoing support projects for each of those greenways to ensure that if and when they get planning permission, there will be a very significant connectivity to areas of like residential areas, maybe retail areas, educational institutions, and so on. Equally, we're looking at others that have been complete, such as in Portmarnock in Baldoyle Hoath, where we can actually do much better connectivity. So we're looking at both what's on the ground currently by way of requests that's coming in, and as I mentioned earlier on, we're looking at those requests for connectivity pieces under multi-criteria analysis, and we're also looking at the future greenways that are being planned in terms of connectivity to have the support projects on the ground to link up with the greenways when they're delivered.
That's great, Sinead, thanks. And I hope the audience finds that that's a much better audio connection now, so we seem to have that issue fixed. The next question that's come in is around protected curbs, and this questioner says in River Valley was one of the first areas to have curb protected cycleways installed, and that there have been a very high number of falls reported by pedestrians in the area up to quite recently, and they're asking, will curbs be removed and when? Sinead, can I put that question to you, please?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're aware of the number of incidents that had happened in River Valley and indeed in Hartstown, Hunstown. Very significant phase 2 works have been underway, and the epoxy resin has been put down, which gives quite a significant delineation in terms of the actual colour of the cycleway itself, and also additional crossing points put in, which reflect the desire lines that were on the ground. And the whole thing as a package, particularly after phase 2 of the works have gone in, a very significant drop off, and almost a complete drop off in terms of the slips and trips that happened in that area. So no, the curbs won't be coming out in. It's a very significant piece of infrastructure. It has brought that area up to the standards. I suppose it was those areas built in the 1970s, so their transport planning would be of that time, and we brought it up now with some very significant investment up to the standards of the roads and the developments that are being put in currently under the DMUR standard, which stands for Design Manual for Urban Roads and Streets. So it has been brought up to the 2020s, you can say, with some very significant infrastructure. And I think the phase 2 works, and indeed the data in terms of slips and trips speaks well for itself.
Thanks, Jane, for that very comprehensive answer. I hope that's helpful to the person who asked it. So the next question that's come in now is around priorities, and this person has asked, what do you see as the main priority for improving cycling in Fingal? A lot of the schemes are very family friendly, but what about the serious cyclists who want to go to work on their bike instead of using the car, for example? So Sinead, I might put that to you for comment.
Okay, well, I think the main point to say there is that what we're building is for everybody. Yeah, the family friendly stuff is what we're absolutely after. That we want to see small children cycling to school and cycling to their training in the evening. We want to see parents with kids out. We want to see other people cycling to work. This is not just for one cohort of people. It's for everybody. And indeed, we're all about the walking as well and the wheeling. So making sure that the footpaths are accessible, for example, for people in wheelchairs and so on. So if it's not good for, as they say, if it's not good for an 80-year-old and an 80-year-old, it's not good for everybody. So if we can kind of make sure that we have it so it's good enough for those two cohorts of people, it'll be good enough for everybody. And we would hope that it continues to be improving for the sort of person who wants to cycle into work and maybe a more long distance commuter, as well as the short distance commuter, the more younger or more vulnerable road user also.
Thanks, Sinead. So the next question that's come in is around impact on business, and somebody has said, what impact will this work you're planning have on businesses in our towns? People need to drive to the shops. Sinead, again, I'll get you to come in with a comment there, and if you want to bring in any other members of the team, please do so.
Okay, well, I suppose there's two things there. You're talking about impact on business, and obviously if anything's being constructed, there's always a temporary impact. And I'm not sure if you're referring to the temporary impact or the long-term impact. So in terms of the impact at construction stage, we'll be engaging very significantly with all the traders and businesses and residents along the streets and roads, whatever we're working to ensure that we can get their views and take their views on board in terms of the construction programming. In terms of the longer term impact, I wouldn't necessarily agree that people need a car to cycle to the shop. Some people do, not everybody does. And I suppose right now maybe there's a very significant prioritization towards taking your car to certain places, and at the loss of the top two people on the transport users hierarchy, which are the pedestrians and the cyclists. So we're ensuring that we redress that balance, which indeed is government policy and has come through the Oireachtas. And in terms of economic development and activity, all the, I suppose, the economic research of a scientific level, which we have read from other countries and indeed from our own country, would suggest that more pedestrians and more cyclists being brought closer to the shops and the retail and hospitality sector also increases and the businesses thrive. And there's some very significant research from Copenhagen in that regard when they launched some of the very big program of works about 10 years ago. And there's also some very good data from Transport for London, and indeed some quite good data closer to home from Dunleary Rathdown on works that they did in Blackrock over the last couple of years. So like we can look further afield or we can look closer, but pretty much all the economic data would suggest there's quite a lot to be gained by traders from encouraging active travel close to their businesses.
Thank you, Sinead. So another question's come in here now around kids, and they're asking what will be done to help make walking to school safer for children.
Okay, thanks, Roshan. I might just pass over to Kieran to have a brief talk about the Safer Routes to School programme there, Kieran.
Yes, indeed. Just as part of a national project driven through all the local authorities, Antashka are part of the lead. At the moment, 11 schools in Fingal have been chosen from the initial tranche to set out the safer routes to school. So what that entails is a lot of it is front of school treatments. So where you have the madness, the 10-minute madness in the morning and the collection time in the afternoon at the gate. That's something it's really quite dangerous for their children that are trying to weave in and out of cars parked up outside school gates. So it's part of the safer routes to school. We want to make it safer at the school gate. So we will be engaging with a number of schools this year, and it'll be a rolling project over the next number of years to provide that safety, that safe area outside the school for kids to be able to walk safer to school. And we also will be looking further afield. We mentioned kissing gates earlier on. That is definitely a barrier for kids to walk to school. You could have a housing estate across the road from a school, but it's a 1 kilometre circuitous route to get to that school because of the railings and walls that are adjoining those housing estates all along down at the school locations. So there will also be footpath improvements and widening where required. So it's a tranche of works that we are going to be carrying out over the next number of years outside these schools and at a distance to the schools. And as part of that, we would have hands-up surveys to find out where the kids travel to the school that they go to. A lot of kids travel less than 1 kilometre to get to school, yet over 50% are being driven. So we need to understand how can we provide safe infrastructure to give those kids that option to walk and cycle to school more safely. If you ask the kids themselves, that's the way they'd rather go to school. So that's all part of the Safer Routes to School programme, and we hope that will benefit the kids. I will make it a lot safer for them to walk and cycle. It's much better for their health. They arrive in class, having done a bit of exercise, and they're much more alert to start learning straight away. Thanks.
Thanks, Kieran, for that. So the next question that's come in is around policy, and somebody's asked what policy documents underpin things like your active travel strategy and how are cycle networks created and implemented? Sinead, I'll put that to you first, and again, if you want to pass it around the team, please do.
Okay, well, I suppose earlier on I had mentioned the various different planning policy documents which this has fit into the National Planning Framework, the National Development Plan, the Climate Action Plan, that's both the national one, the sectoral one for local authorities, and indeed the Climate Action Plan for the county itself, the Regional Spatial Economic Strategy, the Greater Dublin Area Transport Strategy, which is, I think it's in its final stages going through the Oireachtas at the moment. So we're pretty much fitting in to all of those things, except we're bringing it down to a local level in terms of what we're going to do in our unit, what we think is appropriate for Fingal. So it's underpinned by a lot of them. And as I mentioned earlier on, obviously, the County Development Plan is currently under review, and it's an objective in there to prepare and publish the active travel strategy. And in fact, I think by the time they come for the next round of consultation on that, we'll have finalised our active travel strategy, and that possibly may change to promote the active travel strategy. So there's quite a lot of policy underpinning the document itself. Thanks, Roisin.
Thank you. So another question in here relates to something you mentioned earlier, Sinead. It says you're talking about examples from other places a good bit, but how can we be sure those examples will work in Ireland and make sure we don't end up with white elephants lying unused? Sinead, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, okay, well, I suppose this comes up sometimes as in, well, it may work there, but it may not necessarily work here. But I think we'd be remiss if we weren't looking at international best practice. And if you go to a country like the Netherlands or Denmark or City of Copenhagen specifically, you're really struck by quite a lot of similarities, population similarities, weather similarities, although in fairness, their weather is probably worse than ours, and so on. So we do fit in a lot, and also London again will be quite similar. Probably weather's a little bit better in London, and again looking at Amsterdam, the Netherlands, and so on. So we have to look at international best practice and what they're doing, and certainly I would feel like the Dutch are leading the way in this regard globally. And there's a lot of people all over the world have seen some things implemented in Colombia and Bogota in Colombia, which came from ideas that they've seen from Amsterdam. So I think really international best practice is important, but it's also really good to talk to our neighbouring local authorities, which we are doing. We have a lot of working groups and a lot of steering groups and so on in this regard. And the NTA are making sure we're all singing off the same hymn sheet. And also, as I'd mentioned earlier on, some great research coming out of Leary Rathdown with regard to economic activity and some of the pieces of work that they implemented in BlackRock. Also, to ensure that we are doing things correctly and we can assess, more importantly, we can evaluate the success or otherwise of our projects. We're very keen on data in this unit, and we're ensuring that we get a lot of data before and after all the projects so that we'll be able to make those evaluations. And maybe if there are things that we need to tweak or need to change or adjust our focus in some way, we can learn from that and keep moving on. But the more data we have, the better. Hopefully it'll all be showing the success of our projects, but we'll take it as it comes.
Thanks, Sinead. And before we go to another question, I just wanted to return to the next step section there. We had a little bit of trouble with the audio when we were going through that piece. And I think for a lot of people who maybe have never engaged with the strategy or consultation like this before, we should just return to that. And if you could tell us a little bit more about what happens next. Probably don't need the slide for this, but if you want to just talk us through the next steps a bit, that'd be really helpful.
I'll hand that one over to Kieran because he read that slide out.
Perfect, thanks.
Okay.
Okay, I maybe my sound wasn't good there. Yeah, so at the moment, the next steps is that this webinar is part of the next steps. We have the public consultation, which is going to last until the 23rd of May. So please get your submissions in either online or you can or by post. And from those submissions, we will then collate them and group them, and that will then shape what changes that need to be amended in the strategy before we then bring that to the SPC, Planning and Transport Management, SPC, Strategic Policy Committee in Fingal County Council, for the councillors to have their final say over the strategy, and it's from there that the strategy will be published. So that's really the next steps. But please make the submissions, as you can see there on the screen, before the 23rd, by the end of the 23rd of May 2022. Thanks, Roisin.
Thanks very much, Kieran. And before we go through final questions, just a good opportunity to remind people, Kieran mentioned that we'll be out on the road meeting with people next week. So you may or may not be aware that Bike Week starts on the 14th of May and runs through to the 22nd. And we have a huge array of events on during that period. But included in that, the Active Travel Strategy team, including Kieran and myself, will be out in Blanchardstown Shopping Centre on Sunday the 15th of May next weekend, in the pavilions on the 17th of May, and at Malahide Castle on the 22nd as part of a number of Bike Week events. And we'd very much welcome the opportunity to meet with you in person if you'd like to come and talk to us, and we can answer any questions you might have about how the strategy works, and have a good opportunity to have a chat with you. So we look like we've come to final questions now, and we're starting to run out of time. So I think with that, we'll start to wrap up this evening. If you would like to review the recording of this event, as I said, it will be contained on the website in the next couple of days. We'll have that recording added, and the recording of our last session, which took place on April 28th, is already there, and that address is fingal.ie/activetravel/strategy. Pardon me. My thanks very much to the Active Travel team and to Alison from Sister, who joined us here this evening to answer your questions. And thank you very much to all of you for your thoughtful and helpful questions, which we'll take into account. As Kieran mentioned there, the strategy consultation does end on the 23rd of May at 23:59 hours, a minute to midnight. So if you do have anything you'd like to tell us, now is the time. Please go on to consult.fingal.ie in order to review the content of the document. And once you've done that, please tell us what you think of it, be that good or bad. We really, really genuinely want to hear from the public as to what they feel is important to include and exclude from the strategy, and to hear what you think we may have done well, or what we can improve in order to make it a document that really genuinely transforms the way active travel is run in Fingal. So please get those submissions in soon. As I said, on the portal you can do so online, or if you prefer to do so by post, the instructions to do that are also contained on the website. My thanks also to Daniel Gleeson from the Fingal Communications team who produced the webinar for us this evening. If you do intend to make that submission, please don't miss the submission deadline. Unfortunately, if submissions are received after May 23rd at midnight, they won't be taken into account, and any written submission will be read in full by all members of the team and taken into account as they continue their work on the strategy in the coming weeks. So don't delay, go online, read it and tell us what you think today. Thank you very much and good evening.